Human nature is something fascinating about human nature, especially when it comes to the dynamics between men and women. One of the most misunderstood things is how men respond to attention versus how they respond to space. You might think that giving him more attention, being more available, always replying right away, and making sure he knows you're interested is the right move. After all, if you like someone, isn't it natural to show it? But here's the paradox. The more you lean in, the more he leans out. And the more you lean out, the more he finds himself pulled in. It's not a game. It's not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about understanding how attraction works on a deeper psychological level. Men are hardwired to value what they pursue. Think about it. Most of us don't really value what is handed to us. We value what we worked for, what we invested energy in, what made us uncertain at first, but then gave us that thrill of winning when we finally got it. There's no different in dating. If you make yourself completely accessible, always eager, and constantly present, you're removing the very dynamic that triggers his desire to chase. This isn't to say you should be cold, aloof, or rude, but there's a major difference between being open and being over-available. One creates interest, the other often creates indifference. When a man feels like he doesn't have to do anything to get your time or energy, he subconsciously devalues it. Not because he's a bad person, but because that's how the brain works. It assigns more worth to things that are scarce or require effort. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. When you pull back, when you stop feeding his ego with constant affirmation, something happens in his brain. He starts asking questions. Why is she not messaging me? Did I do something wrong? Is she losing interest? Suddenly, you're on his mind. Not because you were loud or needy, but because you became a mystery again. You flipped the script. You triggered the part of him that says, I need to figure this out. I need to get her attention back. This isn't manipulation, it's biology. Men are wired to pursue, and when something is easy to get, they move on to the next challenge. But when something makes them think, when a woman becomes slightly out of reach, when her life seems full, rich, and not centered around him, that's when obsession starts to grow. Think about the last time you really wanted something. Maybe it was a job you didn't know you'd get, a person who was a little mysterious, a goal that felt just slightly out of reach. You didn't sit back and forget about it. You thought about it more. You played out scenarios in your head. You strategized. That's what happens when a man feels you pulling away. Your absence isn't empty, it's filled with the possibility of what he could lose. The most powerful moment in dating isn't when he knows you're interested, it's when he realizes you're not going to wait around. That moment plants a seed. It creates pressure, and pressure, when it comes to attraction, builds desire. It creates that emotional hunger, and that hunger, that's what obsession is built on. When you shift your energy back to yourself, when you live your life in a way that doesn't revolve around what he's doing or not doing, you start to glow differently. You stop being a participant in his life and become a presence that looms in his mind. He doesn't just notice your absence, he feels it. And he starts to wonder, what does she have going on that's more interesting than me? That's a powerful shift. It's subtle, but it changes everything. Instead of you trying to get his attention, he's working to get yours. And here's the truth. The attention you withdraw is more impactful than the attention you give. Because he expects the attention. He doesn't expect the silence. And it's in that space between what he took for granted and what he's suddenly missing that obsession takes root. So don't be afraid to pull back. Don't be afraid to create space. You're not punishing him, you're just reminding him that you are not someone to be taken lightly, that your energy is a privilege, not a guarantee. Let him feel your absence long enough to appreciate your presence. Let's talk about value, because that's what this really comes down to. People don't chase what feels easy to get. They chase what feels special, rare, and worth earning. And that applies in love just as much as it does in any other area of life. When a man meets you and you're instantly giving him all your attention, all your time, making yourself available at the drop of a hat, he doesn't feel lucky. He feels like This is just how it is. Like, he didn't have to do anything to earn that energy. There's no space for the appreciation because he didn't invest anything to get there. And we don't value what we didn't invest in. Now, the moment you start shifting your energy back to you, when you stop being so easily accessible, when you stop chasing responses or waiting for him to text back, that's when everything changes. You're no longer just another option in his phone. You become the person he starts thinking about when there's silence. And you're not showing up constantly, not responding right away, not dropping everything for him. Suddenly, there's a new question in his mind. Why not? That's a powerful question because it means he's no longer assuming your attention is a given. It means he's realizing it's something that can be lost. And when people feel like they can lose something valuable, they act very differently. That's when they start chasing. When obsession begins to build. There's something that happens when your energy becomes less available. It gets more powerful. That's the paradox. The less you give, the more it's noticed. The scarcer your presence becomes, the more he starts paying attention to it. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to prove anything. The quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable, that's magnetic. Think about the most valuable things in life. Diamonds, rare artwork, front row concert seats. Why do people obsess over them? Because they're hard to get. Because not everyone can have them. That's exactly how you need to start seeing yourself. Not as something to be won over by effort, but as someone whose time and energy is earned by consistency and respect. And when you act that way, not in a fake, forced, or manipulative way, but from a genuine place of self-worth, it changes the energy between you and any man who comes into your life. You stop worrying about keeping his interest, and you start evaluating whether he's doing enough to deserve yours. Now, some people might hear that and think it sounds harsh, but this isn't about games. This is about boundaries. This is about recognizing that your attention is a currency. And if you keep giving it away for free, don't be surprised when it's treated like it's worthless. Let me be clear. I'm not saying you should be cold. I'm not saying you should withhold affection or be distant for the sake of it. I'm saying don't overextend yourself just to feel like you're doing enough. You are enough, exactly as you are, without having to prove it every second. When you live your life fully, when you keep showing up for your goals, your passions, your friends, your health, when your world is bigger than him, he feels that. He notices that you're not just sitting by the phone waiting to be picked. That kind of presence doesn't just attract someone, it challenges them. It tells them, if you want a place in my life, you have to bring something real. You see, a man starts to become obsessed when he feels like he's not sure he can have you, when you're not always there at his convenience, when your life continues, whether he's showing up properly or not. That's when he starts wondering about you, thinking about you at night, replaying moments, asking himself what you're thinking. That's when you go from nice to have to can't stop thinking about. And what if he doesn't step up? If he lets you walk away or doesn't match your energy? That tells you everything you need to know, because the right person will never risk losing you over ego or laziness. The right person won't just want your time, they'll work for it, respect it, and protect it. So stop giving away all of your energy for free. Stop offering the whole experience before he's even earned the opening chapter. Make him understand what it means to really have you. When you become the prize, everything else shifts. You've probably heard the phrase, actions speak louder than words, but I'd take it one step further. Silence often speaks louder than both. There's a power in saying nothing, a weight to it. It creates space, tension, mystery. And when it's coming from a woman who usually gives, who's warm, expressive, and attentive, that silence becomes deafening. It changes the entire dynamic. Because here's the truth. When you're constantly explaining yourself, chasing clarity, or always being the one to initiate, he never has to wonder. He never has to sit in his own discomfort. He never has to ask himself what you're thinking or what you're feeling. You're already giving him the answers. And if he never has to wonder, he never has to work, he never has to reflect, and most importantly, he never has to miss you. But when you step back, when you stop over communicating, when you stop showing up where effort isn't being matched, suddenly the silence becomes loud, loud enough to make him pause, loud enough to make him notice. And in that pause, something happens. He starts to think, to reflect, to obsess. There's something incredibly triggering on a psychological level about being used to someone's presence and then having that presence go quiet, especially if that presence was once consistent, nurturing, or emotionally validating. When you suddenly go still, you're not just withholding words, you're taking away the comfort of knowing exactly where he stands with you. And for someone who's gotten comfortable, that's unsettling. That discomfort, that space of uncertainty, that's where obsession begins. It's not the noise that sticks with someone, it's the silence. It's the unanswered text, the story you post with no follow-up message, the quiet Friday night you don't reach out. He starts replaying things in his head. Is she mad? Is she done with me? Did I push her too far? Has she moved on? And it's in those questions that you begin to live rent-free in his mind. Now, some people confuse silence with manipulation, but let me be very clear. This isn't about playing games. It's about no longer filling the space when someone else isn't showing up. It's about resisting the urge to do emotional labor for two people. Sometimes silence is the most honest thing you can offer. Sometimes it's the only way to be heard. We think that explaining more, texting more, being more available will create closeness, and sometimes it does. But when you're the only one doing it, when you're trying to force connection through noise, you're not being heard, you're being drained. You're over communicating to someone who's under listening, and that's a cycle that only ends with you feeling more empty and him feeling more entitled. When you go silent, it doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop overextending where there's no reciprocity. And trust me, he will notice. Men notice when the energy shifts, when the woman who used to check in no longer does, when the one who used to double text suddenly doesn't even send one, when the woman who used to explain her feelings now leaves him guessing. And here's the kicker. Silence gives him space to come toward you. If he has real interest, if there's any emotional investment on his part, that silence becomes the most powerful magnet. It becomes the moment he stops taking you for granted, the moment he starts to realize he could actually lose you. And that realization doesn't hit in the middle of a long text. It hits in the emptiness, in the quiet, in the gap between what used to be there and what's no longer available. It's not about punishing him, it's about protecting your peace. There comes a point where silence isn't cold, it's sacred. It's the sound of you choosing yourself. And that sound, he hears it loud and clear, whether he admits it or not. Sometimes we think the only way to be understood is to explain, to push, to try harder. But there's a strength in knowing when to stop talking, when to step back and let your absence speak for you. Because when a man starts noticing what's missing, that's when he starts realizing what he had. And that realization doesn't come from your words, it comes from your silence. So if you're tired of repeating yourself, stop. If you feel like he's not listening, stop. If you've said everything there is to say and nothing's changing, stop and let your silence do what your words never could. Let him feel the difference between being talked to and being missed. There's a switch that flips in a man's mind the moment a woman pulls back emotionally, not because she's angry, not because she's playing games, but because something inside her has gone quiet. Maybe she's tired. Maybe she's finally paying attention to how little she's getting back, or maybe she's simply refocusing her energy on herself. Whatever the reason, the moment she stops pouring emotional fuel into the connection, he feels it. And that shift can be incredibly powerful. Most men don't realize what they have when a woman is emotionally available, when she's checking in, when she's asking how he's feeling, when she's bringing warmth, connection, softness. That kind of presence is so subtle, it's easy to take for granted. He assumes it will always be there, that she'll always be understanding, always forgiving, always there to meet him halfway or more than halfway, and until she stops. When a woman withdraws emotionally, it's not always a loud exit. In fact, most of the time it's quiet. It's her no longer explaining why she's hurt. It's her not chasing after clarity. It's her showing up differently, colder perhaps, more detached, less available for the small talk. the check-ins, the how was your day, messages she used to send without thinking. And to the man on the receiving end, that difference is jarring. He might not even realize why it bothers him at first, but it does, because something that used to make him feel seen and important is suddenly gone. And in that absence, a pressure builds. It's subtle at first. Maybe he just notices she's not as responsive. Maybe she didn't watch his story, didn't like his post, didn't text back right away. He brushes it off, but then it continues. She's no longer leaning in. She's no longer emotionally feeding the dynamic. That's when the unease starts to kick in. You see, when a man senses emotional withdrawal, it creates a kind of psychological tension. Suddenly, he's not in control of the emotional rhythm anymore. He doesn't know where she stands. And that uncertainty becomes a trigger. His mind starts working overtime. He starts scanning for signs, remembering old conversations, overanalyzing things he never thought twice about. That's when the obsession starts to grow. Because here's the truth, the human brain hates emotional ambiguity. We crave closure. We want to understand where we stand with people, especially people who once made us feel good. So when a woman who used to be emotionally engaged begins to pull back, it invites some curiosity. It makes him uncomfortable. That discomfort becomes the thing he wants to solve. And in trying to solve it, he becomes emotionally hooked. Not because you did something to manipulate him, but because you stopped doing what he took for granted. He starts thinking, wait, why is she acting different? Did I mess up? Is she talking to someone else? Has she moved on? Suddenly, it's no longer about casually seeing where things go. It becomes about figuring out what he lost and, more importantly, how to get it back. The irony is, he may not have shown much motion when you were fully invested. He may have even pulled away himself. But your emotional absence highlights what your emotional presence used to give him. That's when it hits. That's when he feels the loss and starts to change, not just you, but the feeling you used to bring him. And here's the beautiful thing. You didn't have to raise your voice. You didn't have to plead. You didn't have to beg him to step up. You simply changed the emotional temperature and he felt it. That quiet shift, your emotional withdrawal, became the loudest message of all. It said, without words, this isn't enough for me anymore. And that statement carries weight. It forces him to decide whether he's willing to meet you at the level you deserve or whether he's going to let you drift away for good. What's powerful about this is that it gives the man space to step up. When he feels that distance, he has a choice. He can ignore it or he can lean in. He can let his ego run the show or can start showing effort. But whatever he chooses, you'll know it's real because no one chases what they don't value and no one values something that's always there regardless of how they act. So don't be afraid to stop over-investing emotionally. Don't be afraid to create that space. It's not about punishing anyone. It's about preserving yourself. It's about giving him the opportunity to realize your worth without you constantly trying to prove it. And if he doesn't rise to meet you, that silence tells you everything. Let him feel the emptiness that your emotional presence used to fill. There's a shift that happens when you stop making someone the center of your world. And it's not just internal, it has a real visible effect on the way they see you. Because the truth is, most people are drawn to what they can't quite grasp, what isn't completely predictable, what has its own gravity. And that gravity, that's created when you start focusing on your own life, when you recenter yourself, when your energy no longer revolves around someone else's behavior. We tend to think the more we focus on someone, the more they'll feel connected. That if we're always available, always accommodating, always tuned in to their moods and needs, they'll appreciate it and want us more. But often the opposite happens. The more you orbit around someone, the less they notice your presence. It's only when you break that pattern, when you step back and start giving your own life the attention you were giving them, that things start to shift. And they feel it. Men are intuitive in ways they don't always acknowledge. They know when your world shrinks down to them. They may not say it out loud, but they feel when you're constantly watching, waiting, adjusting. And they also feel when you stop, when your responses become more measured, when you're not always online, when you're not jumping to reply or putting your plans on hold, when you're clearly focused on your own journey, something changes in the energy between you. And that change is powerful. It sparks curiosity. Where is she? What is she doing? Why doesn't she seem as invested as before? These aren't questions that come up when you're pouring everything into him. They come up when you reclaim your time and start living in a way that isn't centered around him. You're not pulling away to get a reaction. That's not the point. You're pulling your energy back to where it always should have been, in your own pain. And ironically, that's exactly what makes you more attractive. Because nothing is more magnetic than someone who is fulfilled on their own. Someone who's not looking to be completed, but who is already complete and only interested in sharing that energy with someone who's worthy of it. When a man sees that your attention is no longer guaranteed, that you're not seeking his validation to feel good about yourself, he starts to view you differently. He starts to wonder what's changed. And in that wondering, you become more valuable in his mind. You go from being a certainty to a mystery. A mystery, real, grounded, confident mystery, is irresistible. He starts to realize that your energy isn't something he can just expect anymore, that if he wants it, he has to do more, be more present, be more intentional. That awareness builds pressure, and pressure in this context is exactly what creates emotional urgency. He starts to chase, not because you're manipulating him, but because your detachment reminded him of your value. See, obsession doesn't grow in comfort, it grows in contrast. The contrast between when you were available and when you're no longer waiting, between the time you used to spend thinking about him and the way you now spend that time building your own life. The guy who is once used to being the focus now has to figure out how to get back into your frame. That's when the table turn. This is where the obsession grows, not just from desire, but from a sense of missing what once felt certain. That missing becomes a motivator. It pulls him back in. It lights a fire that wasn't there before because you created the space for him to feel something. And that space only exists when you stop filling every moment, every silence, every gap. It's not that you don't care. It's that you care about yourself enough not to sit around waiting. That self-respect doesn't push people away. It draws in the ones who are meant for you, and it pushes away the ones who only stayed because it was easy. So you don't need to change. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to live. Build your life. Fill your days. Become so focused on what's lighting you up that he has no choice but to look up and wonder where you went and what he has to do to be part of your world again. Because when a man starts to realize your energy isn't promised, he'll do whatever it takes to earn it back. There's something deeply unsettling for a man when a woman he thought would always be there suddenly becomes unpredictable. Not in a chaotic or dramatic way, but in the sense that her energy is no longer fixed on him. It throws him off. He can't quite read her anymore. And that uncertainty, that's what gets under his skin and keeps him up at night, because what he once thought was safe, expected, and comfortably within reach is no longer guaranteed. It's elusive. And what's elusive becomes irresistible. We all crave some sense of certainty in our relationships. That's human nature. But here's the paradox. Too much certainty too soon without having earned it makes people lose interest. When someone feels like they don't have to work for your time, your affection, your energy, it's not that they stop liking you, it's that they stop valuing you. The effort disappears, the spark fades. You're still amazing, but you're no longer a mystery. You're no longer something he has to step up for. But when you stop showing up in predictable ways, when you stop replying immediately, when your mood no longer revolves around his attention, when your world keeps moving forward with or without him, he starts to feel it. That loss of emotional predictability gets in his head. Suddenly, he's wondering, what's changed? Did I do something? Why isn't she reacting the way she used to? That unpredictability is not about playing hot and cold. It's about being in tune with yourself instead of always reacting to him. It's about no longer being emotionally dependent on his actions. You're no longer in that reactive space where every message or lack of message dictates your mood. You're grounded, you're stable, but you're no longer predictable. And that balance, that combination of calm and distance is what draws him in deeper than anything else. When he starts to feel like he can't easily predict your next move, that's when his interest sharpens. That's when his mind starts to turn over questions, looking for answers that aren't being handed to him anymore. And he replays your last conversation. He checks your social media a little more off. He starts to notice the little shifts, and those shifts build curiosity. That curiosity becomes mental investment. And that's where obsession is born, not out of confusion, but out of the need to figure you out again. He used to know where he stood. Now he's not so sure. He used to feel in control. Now something has shifted and he's not the one leading the rhythm anymore. That loss of emotional control, it's subtle, but it makes a man start to work harder, to test the waters, to re-engage. He might start initiating more, asking deeper questions, making more of an effort. Not because he suddenly changed overnight, but because your change forced him to notice what he was no longer getting without effort. And that's the power of no longer being predictable. It interrupts the pattern. It reminds him that he's not entitled to your presence. And more than that, it sparks something inside him that wasn't active before. The part that wants to win, the part that wants to earn. Because what we earn, we respect. What we have to figure out, we get attached to. What we're afraid of losing, we fight for. You become unpredictable the moment you stop centering him in your life. When you stop reacting the same way, when you stop handing over your piece every time he pulls back, and you don't have to explain it. In fact, the less you explain, the more powerful it becomes. He doesn't need to know why your energy shifted. He just needs to feel that it has. And if he values you, if he sees what he could lose, he'll come closer. He'll step up. He'll try to crack the code. That's how obsession builds, not through over-availability, but through a kind of emotional distance that he's not used to navigating. It's not about being cruel or dismissive. It's about being real. You're not a machine programmed to respond the same way every time. You're a woman with emotions, with boundaries, with depth. And when he starts to see that he can't predict or control your every move, he starts to realize that he has to show up differently, more consistently, more intentionally, more fully. Because in the end, it's not your availability that makes you unforgettable, it's your unpredictability. It's the way you stay centered no matter what he does. It's the way you create space without needing to fill it with explanation. That's the kind of presence that lingers. That's the kind of woman he thinks about long after the conversation ends. Let him feel what it's like to no longer be able to read you.